Hello everyone. In the previous video, we talked a little bit about doing some preliminary research together as a class in two hypothesis assignments to kind of see what's out there in terms of subjects that are treated in happiness studies with a specific focus on looking for inspiration for our upcoming research paper, something that interests you that is open to discussion and debate. So I did choose two articles that lend themselves to that will also lead to other topics as well. So in this video, I'm going to show you kind of a second layer of preliminary research. And once you get outside of an English class, this is actually probably where you would start when you've been given a subject or a task to write about. If you know anything about that, you'll write about that and kind of think on paper and see where that takes you. But if you don't know anything, or if you've already done that, then you're going to kind of have to do some exploratory reading, skimming, kind of looking to see what's out there, and hopefully to land on a few articles that you can kind of read more at length and get ideas from. So in preliminary research, you're not looking yet to find sources for your research paper because at this point you have not developed a working thesis yet. You haven't settled on an angle or a specific topic about happiness yet. So some of that requires you and to kind of draw on things that you already know and also draw on the things that you've read or watched previously. So I am going to show you some informal tricks. Now, keep in mind that from our assignment sheet, which I do need to return to in a moment, because one thing I did forget to mention is that on the sources for your research paper, and I guess while I'm here, let me go ahead and click on that again just to highlight a few things. And this is why I recommend that you print it out. Because if we look at the sources here, it says we've got to have 7, but at least 4 of them have to come from the STC databases and TED Talks and anything that I put in Blackboard. So if you like either one of the articles that I put in Blackboard, you're welcome to use, either one of those. But we're limited to using sources that are in the STC databases and the TED Talks. So that's important to know, because if you don't know that, then what may happen is you might just think, oh, 7 sources, research paper, got it, and you're off to the races. And maybe you're doing random searches on the internet. And if you do a random search, you might land on something that would be okay to use in a research paper, depending on the professor. But you can also land up on sources that would not be suitable or appropriate to use in a college level research paper, and most of the time professors are going to limit where you can look, and they may even limit the kinds of sources that you can have. But right now we're doing preliminary research. We're trying to get ideas for the paper. Now, the tricks that I'm going to show you are going to lead to things that for the most part will be available in the STC databases, or they're things that are journal articles and things like that. And then there's some other techniques that I'll show you, also informal, that will lead you to articles that are on the internet that can be found in the STC databases. And the reason why I like these is that the databases can be frustrating. They're really good, and I am going to show you how to use those just on their own. And there's a value to that, of having the tenacity and developing the creativity and the skills and the steps to search the databases. But sometimes students get, and just anybody really, gets frustrated because it's very vast. There's so much stuff in there, and sometimes even though there's so much stuff in there, it can be overwhelming trying to find the specific things that you're looking for. So I always like to start small and more informally. The first thing I want to show you is the World Happiness Report. Now, this is not in the STC databases, but this is okay for you to use if you find something that you like. Every year they put out the World Happiness Report, and it's pretty big, and it's got all kinds of stuff. You can download the report. It's got chapters. Now, maybe it's so long you don't want to fiddle with it, but you certainly may want to look at it and see if anything speaks to you. From the 2024 report, we can see some of the things that they have here in terms of subjects. If any of this spoke to you, you could click on it and kind of see what it was, and you might get some ideas for that. And you may even want to use this as a source. This is one example of an internet source that I would be okay if you used. It's legitimate and it's appropriate for a college level research paper. And again, if you download it, it's probably a giant document. I haven't downloaded the 2024 one, but the other ones have been big, but you wouldn't have to use the whole thing. For example, like let's say you were kind of interested in the relationship between happiness and age, and you wanted to see what the summary of that report was. You might get some ideas there and so on. So that is one idea. Another place that you can go is Semantic Scholar, and this is a free AI-powered research tool for scientific literature. Now, I don't remember off the top of my head how much stuff it has here for happiness, but we're just going to kind of take a look-see, and it's free, and they also have these cool PDF reader type things in there with some features. It's really good, and it's a good way to kind of find potentially some sources. So I'm going to see what I can find in here. I'm going to type in happiness, and it's always good when, well, it's kind of nice when something pops up like this, then it gives you something to go on. But if you have other ideas of things that you want to explore, you can type those things in. So I'm going to type in happiness and meaning and just see what comes up. The relationship of happiness and meaning. So you can kind of see the titles here. And so there's actually a lot of stuff. So when you're first exploring, obviously you can't read everything and you can't read 7,000 things. So you can do things to narrow the search, or you can kind of look, maybe expand, and you read the little abstract here, and if it looks promising, then you would click on it and explore it further. So let's see, did I click on one here? No, that's a different one. So let's just, for the sake of looking, I'm just going to click on this one. Now, obviously, you wouldn't be going this fast. You'd kind of look, you'd kind of browse, you'd skim, and so on. And then you can see citations out to other things. And this is just one way that you could find something. So let's say I read this and I decide I wanted to look at it. Then I could click the link to say view it on PubMed. And so this is an open access journal. These kind of things are generally things that I am okay with, and the PubMed should also be on the SDC databases. But we got to make sure that when you do something like this, and like say you say that, oh, this looks promising, you'd have to make sure that you could access this as a PDF. And right now, I am not seeing that option here. I am seeing just kind of it says free full text. Let me click on this. There we go. Here's the PDF. There we go. Okay, so there I have the PDF if I want to, and I can save that and look at it. There's all kinds of neat features on Semantic Scholar if you decide to explore this, and it can be a quick way to find some things. So that's one option. Let me close that. Another option is a site called Consensus. Let me go back and see if I can go to, I've already signed in. So let me go up, and of course I'm getting an error message. Let me see what I can do. Invalid. Okay, so let me go over here and Consensus, go to Consensus, AI powered search engine. And notice it says Pro here. I do not have a Pro account, but you get their Pro analysis thing. You get like 10 of those, but you can use it for, just the basic version after that. So I'm going to type in happiness and pie model. Now, the reason why I'm typing this in is obviously I've read a lot about happiness, and so I have a lot of things bouncing around in my head. And the happiness pie model basically makes a claim that says that happiness is 50% genetics. So think of it like a pie chart, that 50% of it is genetics, and 40% is intentional action, and that only 10% of our happiness comes from our life circumstances. So I remember the first time I saw that, I thought that was the most insane thing that I had ever heard of. And if I remember to, I'll show you where I saw that to begin with. And I thought it was so insane, I started looking that up and then discovered that, that not everybody buys into that and so on. So it's kind of controversial, the happiness pie model. And it's certainly open to discussion and debate, like kind of quantifying how much of your happiness is determined by genetics and how much by intentional actions and the things you do, and then saying that only 10% of your happiness comes from that. This is one of the things I really love about consensus is it gave me like an explanation of what it is, alternative models and approaches. So it gave me like an upshot of it. And I realize this is probably their pro feature there, but then we look down here and here are their articles. So I already clicked on this one, as easy as pie, and this takes us to signature Springer link. And okay, so here we go. Here's the happiness pie model. Intentional activity, our genetics, that we have a set point, and our circumstances, and so on. So here is the article, and I can download the PDF if I want. And this is also something that should appear in the STC databases, but these are journal articles. These are not, some guy's blog from Montana or something. So these are good sources, but I do want us to also look in the databases. But this is, what we're doing here is not trying to find sources to use. We're trying to find ideas. And I'm showing you a couple of different fishing holes, if you will, of what you can look in. If you remember in the previous video, we looked at using JSTOR on the regular internet and saying JSTOR and typing in a keyword and coming up with things there. And now we're looking at some other fishing holes where you can find things. What I really like about this is this particular article is in the Journal of Happiness Studies. I am pretty sure, but you can double check, that we actually have this journal in our online databases. So one of the cool things there, when I show you how to search in those, if you have any publications that you want to look in, you can actually narrow your search to only look and say the Journal of Happiness Studies, or to only look in Psychology Today, or to only look in The Atlantic, which is where the article that we got for our first essay was from. I really love The Atlantic and Time magazine and things like that, because they will condense and present in easy to digest format, a lot of things that can lead us to good papers and good sources in a research paper. So I'll show more about that later, but I wanted to show a couple of different fishing holes, so to speak, that you could look in. And probably out of the ones that I'm showing you, let's see, where did it go? Semantic Scholar is definitely a favorite. The JSTOR hack is a favorite. And then we jump over here, and you probably already know about Google Scholar. This is where you're going to be able to find also scholarly articles using this method. I already have one up here, and it's like using any other search engine, but now it has narrowed the search. So instead of just going to Google and typing in things where you're going to get a variety of things, here it's going to limit you to things that have a scholarly angle to them. So you're more likely to find something that would be suitable to use. But keep in mind that when you're doing preliminary research, it doesn't really matter where the ideas come from. You could get an idea from even a random YouTube video, the idea for that, but the ultimate articles that you choose for your paper, those need to be things that come from the databases and things like that. Now, some of these things will lead to things that are actually already on there. So let's see, what can we type here? I'm going to type in happiness and, oh, here we go. This is lovely. Let's do happiness and money. And so we see a whole bunch of things here, and we can do things over time to narrow that. Happiness and money correlation. I don't know, and you just kind of explore, and it takes a little bit of time and curiosity and tenacity. And then, like anything, you look at titles, you see if anything grabs you, you read the abstract, which is nice. It's kind of like a little summary that tells you the upshot of what it is. But then you actually have to click on it to see. I prefer the articles that are in PDF form myself because they tend to be more well developed. I don't know. Let's see if it'll let me do this. Let me see if it'll let me bring up things that are just PDFs. It may not. Yeah, there we go. Here's one. I'm just going to click on this one to see what we get. And we see that, and we'd have to read to see, is this worth clicking on? We see that the PDF is available here, and so on. And you'd have to read the abstract and look and see. And I'm going to tell you a trick when you're reading journal articles like this. Read the abstract, read the introduction, and look at the headings that you have all the way through. But when you really want to get like an upshot of what it's about, read the introduction and read the conclusion, because it'll kind of explain the upshot. The articles that are more sciencey or have more math in them, because they did some kind of study, the conclusion will generally, summarize, those things up so you can get an upshot, of those. Chances are, you may not be using things that are that technical in nature, but we're just looking at, again, different fishing holes and different places you can go look. So far we've looked, at our hypothesis assignments in the class. We've looked at, using the World Happiness Report, using Consensus, using Semantic Scholar, and now Google Scholar. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is one of my absolute favorite things to do. I love TED Talks. And if you don't know what TED Talks are, boy, you don't know what you're missing. So I'm just going to type on TED.com. And it stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. But they're really high interest short videos on a bunch of different subjects. Everything from physics to poetry, dancing, whatever the latest issues are. I mean, every issue under the sun has a TED Talk. They have a ton of stuff on here that has to do with happiness, and a lot of the best videos on here that have to do with happiness don't even have the word happiness in them. So, and the only reason I know that is because I've seen a lot of TED Talks, and you stumble on them and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so great. So I'm going to show you a couple that I'm familiar with. Well, I know I probably have 20 or more TED Talks just off the top of my head that are really great for a paper like this one. And again, even if you didn't end up using a TED Talk, the ideas in there can spark a lot of things. So I'm going to go to another one that I haven't called up yet, and this one is called How the Worst Moments in Our Lives Make Us Who We Are. And notice how it does not have happiness in it. And let's see, did I not hit that? Let's try this again. How the worst moments in our lives make us who we are. There we go. And this is by Andrew Solomon, extremely well spoken, very moving, and he has other TED Talks on here too. And I'm just going to click on it. I'm not going to play it. But this is how the worst moments in our lives make us who we are. And It's related to the concept of happiness, and it's also related to the first hypothesis assignment that I've given you called the upside of feeling down. He doesn't talk about the upside of feeling down, but he talks about how some of the worst things that happen to you in life can end up obviously making you who you are. They become part of you, and if you choose to, you can become better for those things. It's incredibly moving and powerful. You may not agree with his argument, but it's very compelling nonetheless, and he gives some really good examples, not only from his own life, but from one of the books that he wrote where he interviewed people that had such horrible things happen to them that most of us cannot fathom those things, and how they took those things and kind of became the heroes of their own story, if you will. It's got a great line in there that says, if you slay the dragons, you slay the heroes. So he's basically saying, don't wish for a life free of adversity, because it's that adversity and those challenges that make you who you are. So that's one example there. I do not want to become a member of that. That's one example. Here's another, and this is by Daniel Kahneman. It's called The Riddle of Experience versus Memory. And right now I'm on the TED website, and this is a TED Talk, and this is the transcript. So the great thing about this is when you're browsing TED Talks, you can kind of read the blurb and see what it's about. You can use AI if you want to, if you want to process it. So I think I already did that on this one. And so I asked, but in order to do that, I had to bring up the YouTube for it in Edge. So if you bring up the TED Talk in the window, it'll say, I'm sorry, I can't access your video. But if you bring it up in Edge, you can get a summary of it. You can ask for key claims, and you can kind of get an upshot and see, okay, do I want to really watch that? Well, I've seen this, and he talks about the cognitive traps that we can fall into when we're thinking about happiness, and he makes some interesting arguments and observations about our experiencing self versus our remembering self. And he says that a lot of how we characterize our own happiness is related to what we remember and the stories we create from our memories. But he says our memories are actually distorted and often don't accurately reflect the experience that we had at the time. So, he kind of points to the fact that there is often a disconnect between how we recall something and how we actually experienced it in the moment. And he said a lot of that has to do with, one of the points he makes is how events end. Like he says, you could have a birthday party and the whole thing was great and awesome, but if something dramatic or kind of bad happened at the very end, that's kind of all your mind hangs on to. And so you might file that away in your mind as like, oh, it was the most terrible birthday party ever, but it actually wasn't. It was actually great. There was just something at the end. And so it's really interesting. But the point is that this is a great fishing hole to look in for ideas. There are so many powerful, really interesting things here. And if you're ever stuck for ideas, I'm not kidding when I say I probably have 20 or more TED Talks that I could rattle off right now off the top of my head that explore various angles. Now, when you go in, you can go in and type in happiness and see what that happen, what ties into that. But don't limit yourself to that, because sometimes, as in the two videos that I've shown here, sometimes the best videos that have to do with happiness may not even have the word happiness in it. So you can have TED Talks in as your actual sources, but these can also be great for just finding ideas. Highly, highly recommend. This is one of my favorite tricks and hacks. Okay, and the last couple of things that I want to show you in terms of informal preliminary research. Remember that the focus of this video is not on finding sources to use in your paper, but on finding things that will lead you to ideas that will give you inspiration for an angle to explore. Some of these fishing holes that I have shown you will lead to things that you can find in the databases and use. I love the Atlantic magazine. It has an online presence here, but we also actually have the copies, the print copies, in our online STC databases. That's where I got the article for the Garber essay. But I like to also leverage just the regular internet to find those things. So notice that I typed in the Atlantic and happiness, and I'm going to see lots of titles and things about happiness here that are from the Atlantic. At some point it's going to be something else here, but the first few are going to be limited to that. I also like to do, I could do The Economist. That's another well-regarded kind of general audience magazine. We have that in the STC databases too, and I could do that. Psychology Today is another, and I did have up here just a minute ago, I had one for Time Magazine. I guess I accidentally closed it, but I like to type in Time Magazine and whatever my keywords are about happiness. I like to look at the covers of Time Magazine just to see, especially the ones that are about happiness, like what their big articles are. Those give me ideas, and browse the articles there. I am going to show you how to use the regular STC databases, but I think those are kind of overwhelming for brainstorming purposes or just kind of finding ideas. These are all good ways, and I'm not at all suggesting that you do all of these at once. It's kind of like when you go fishing for real. You pick a fishing hole, you try something, you see if you get anything that's promising, and keep at it for a bit, and then you go to other things too, and it can be very, very productive. Last thing I want to show you is, I know we already looked at JSTOR, but remember JSTOR Daily is kind of like their little newsletter. But any of the things that you find in there, you're going to be able to find JSTOR articles on those things, even just on the regular internet. Some things that you click on there will say, oh, log into your institution. So it's not that all of JSTOR is on the regular internet, but a lot of it is. And if you ever encounter anything that says, oh, log into your institution, we'll just log into the STC databases and you can access those things there. So here, if we clicked on Teaching Happiness, this should take us to a little, again, it's kind of like their little newsletter article. And so I haven't read this, but just on the title alone, if we talk about teaching happiness, then that tells me that maybe this is about the notion that happiness is a skill and that it can be taught, and that implies that maybe there's some element of control over our happiness, and so there could be something interesting there. So these are informal strategies for you to do some preliminary research on the regular internet to kind of see what's out there and see what's debatable. And obviously, you can narrow your search terms to get more precise results and so on. So I'm going to wrap this up so I can get this out, and I'll save any talk about the actual STC databases for a different video. All right, y'all have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon.